Kids, and this is our last week that we're going to be doing Junior Church online. I'm so excited to get back to church in person, and it's just going to be a good time. And so this is my last week, and this is Miss James' last week. So I hope you've been paying attention. I hope you have been getting something from these lessons. And so we're going to learn one more parable today, and it's going to be about the three men given talents. So I got one question for you, and first we're going to be in Matthew chapter 25. Matthew chapter 25. We're going to be in verse 14. That's where we're going to start. But I got a question. Pretend you're all grown up. I know a lot of you kids just want to be grown up, do grown up things. And pretend that you're a millionaire. You have $1 million. And you want to hire somebody to take care of your money. Now, do you want somebody that's going to just keep it and not really do anything with it, or do you want somebody who's going to use it and make more money out of it? So say you have $1 million and you want $2 million, you just want to leave it at $1 million. Hopefully you want to leave it at $2 million. You want to go there. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about this parable in Matthew chapter 25. And it says in verse 14, it says, "For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country." So there's this master, this young man, and he goes on this journey. He goes into this far land on this journey. And then it says, "Who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods." So this man, he was a very well-respected man. He had lots of money. He did what he was told to do, and he did everything his mother asked him to do when he was young. His father, he did everything his father asked him to do, his teacher, so on and so forth. So this man, he bought property, he has servants, and they help him out. And he ends up going on this journey, and he calls over his servants, and he's like, "Come on, guys." He has three servants, and he calls them over, and he says, "I have this money, and I'm going into a far country. I'm going to give each of you some money based on your experience, your talent, your abilities, stuff like that." And he knew the different personalities they had, and he knew the different skills and abilities they had. And the first one, he had great wisdom in taking care of money. He knew the servant would be diligent with his money, and he just knew that he'd be carefully to invest it. And so he ends up giving the first servant 5 talents. Now that's a lot. And talents were very hard to come by back then. It's a very rare, not super rare, but it was you're very wealthy if you had talents. So he gave the first one 5 talents. Then he called the second servant over, and he wasn't as experienced as the first servant, and he called him over and he said, "Okay, I gave the first servant 5. Now I'm going to give you 2. I'm going to give you 2 talents." Then he called the third servant over, and he knew, he's not always diligent. He takes a lot of breaks when he ought to be working, and, I'll give him 1 talent. We'll see what he can do with it. So this man goes on his journey, this master, and he ends up giving the first one 5, the second one 2, and the third one 1 talent. So the master, he's just ready to go on this journey. And then the first servant, once he leaves, like in verse 16, it says, "Then I received the 5 talents, went and traded with the same, and made them other 5 talents." So the first servant, he did a lot of good with his money. He had 5 talents, he had 5 talents to start with, and he made 5 more. So he had a total of 10 talents. And that's good. If you're able to double that, that was very good, and the master's going to be super happy to hear that. Now, the second servant looked at his 2 talents that his master had left, and he's like, "The master has been so generous to me, and I don't deserve his generosity or his trust or his care, but he's been so good to me, and I'm going to do the best I can to earn as much money as I can." And so look at, here was the master giving his talents out. And you can see the first one has 5, the second one has 2, and the third one has 1. So now these servants are just like, "What am I going to do with this?" So the first one doubled it. And then the second one's like, "I'm going to do what I can with these 2 talents." And he just worked hard, and he earned 2 more talents before his master returned home. So he also made more. Then the last servant, the third servant, looked at his one talent and thought, imagine that my master only gave me one talent when my fellow servants got so much more. He's thinking, I deserve better than this. Why do I only have this much money? My master already has so much. Why only I get so little? And he said, I just need to take some time to relax and enjoy myself. I need time for some fun and to take care of myself, not for my master. And he said, let's see, maybe I can spend my talent on myself. Or he's like, I can't spend it on myself. My master is going to be really angry with me. I can't give it to my friends. And if I keep it in my house, people will find it. So he ends up burying it. Look at the top two, the first and second, made more money, and the last one buried it. So nobody would ever know. So he's like, I'm going to bury it in the ground, and when my master comes on and returns, I'll give him his talent back. And, he gave me one talent, so he should have one talent when he comes home. So the unfaithful servant, who really wasn't interested in helping out his servant or serving his master, took his one talent and buried it in the ground. Look in verse 19. It says, after a long time the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoneth with them. So the master's business in the far country was finished, and it was time for him to return home. And he wondered while he was away, what did my servants do with the money I gave to them? What did they do? Did they help me? Or did they not do anything with it? And so look in verse 20 one more time. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought another 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliveredst unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. So the first servant, he's so happy to go to his master and say, I've doubled the money you've given me. I've made 5 more talents than you've given me. And here's your money. And the master's just so happy. And he said, well done. Look in verse 21. And his Lord said unto him, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Then he goes to the second one. The one that had 2, who ended up making 4 total. He said, he also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliveredst unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. So he's so happy again that his second servant made 2 more and doubled what he had given him, what he had entrusted to him. His Lord said unto him, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Then he which had received 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou art a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. There thou hast that is thine. So he finally breaks the news. The last servant breaks the news that he buried his talent in the ground to his master. And the master is not happy. Look in verse 25. His Lord answered and said unto him, or 26, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I reap where I sow not, and gather where I have not strawed. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received mine own with usury. So the third servant was not expecting that. Instead of praising the third servant, the master said, You have been wicked and lazy. He said, Take that 1 talent from this man and give it to the man with 10 talents. He's saying, I know I can, look at it. Take therefore the talent from him and give it unto him which hath 10 talents. For unto every one that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance, but from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath. And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness, there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So he's not, the last servant did not end up getting anything after that. He ended up even getting that talent away from him. He had no money. But look at this. The master is just so angry at him. And the servant was just distraught and knew that he should have done better with his money. So whom do you think the master is? Whom do you think it is? God is the master in this story. He is the giver of all we have, and his servants, that's us. He gives us salvation, our families, he gives us our houses, clothing, food, our games, our tools, he gives us our talents, our abilities. Everything we have comes from our God. And he could give us these things and give us these things, but what really matters is what we do with them. What really matters is what we do with the talents and abilities and skills God has given us. If you have the ability to sing and you don't sing in like a church choir or a singing group, you're not using your ability at all. But our master, the Lord, gives everybody something. And like the master in the story, God wants us to use what he gives us for him. He's going to each give us a talent. What we're going to do with that is whether we get to keep it or not. He wants us to remember what actually belongs to him. Do you remember what the two faithful servants wanted to do with their master's money? They wanted to use it exactly like the master would use it. And that's God's plan for us too. How would God use the abilities he's given us? That's what we should think about whenever we see something that comes into our life that's from God. If you have clothes on your back, if you have a bed to sleep on, God's blessed you already. If you have food to eat, water to drink, you've already been blessed by God. When he gives you money, he wants you to tithe on it. And then you use the rest the way he would use it. What would Jesus spend his money on? Would he give it to others? What do you have? What talents has God given you? Do you do well in school? Well, if you do well in school, help other kids that are maybe struggling. But don't ruin an opportunity or skill or an ability that God gives you. He's going to give us different amounts of abilities and talents and skills, but depending on how you use them is how God's going to greatly increase them. Even if you don't have these talents, he wants you to use the mind you do have for him. He wants you to do your best with every single thing he gives you. He wants you to use it like he would if he were here. If he were here and he said, here, I'm going to give you $10. What would you do with that $10? Would you give $1 of it to tithe? And then maybe give 5 of it, something like that, to a neighbor who can't buy food or something? But even something else happened with the two faithful servants. Their master shared his joy with them. And God will share his joy with you when you serve him with the gifts he gives you, because he is so loving and so kind to each one of us. When I mentioned what God gives us, the first thing I mentioned was salvation. He has given us one of the greatest gifts that's for everybody, and it's salvation. Salvation is asking Jesus into your heart and cleansing you from your sins and having a home in heaven. If you have never made that decision, I say this every week, if you have never made that decision, you need to go to a parent or a pastor or a leader in the church, and we would be glad to show you from the Bible how you can know you're going to heaven. Because we're all sinners, but God's given us this gift and we can't squander it. We need to take it, not bury it in the ground. So kids, I've been so blessed to have the opportunity to teach you guys these past 5 weeks. It has been so much fun to prepare and learn. And I don't know who's watching this, but I hope you guys are getting something from it. And so I'm so excited to see you guys at church here in just about a week. A little over a week, but I'm ready to come right back and to see you guys and just rejoice in the Lord together again in one place.
Hello, everyone. We've reached our final story about Hamid, Kinza, and Jenny. Shortly after Jenny accepted Jesus as her savior, Hamid was working with the merchant in the market. Now he stayed with the nurse at nights, but he still liked to earn his own food. He knew he was helping this way. As Hamid was working, he saw someone in the crowds that gave him pause. It looked like his stepfather. Hamid crouched down quickly and tried to get closer and see. It was his stepfather, and he was looking around the marketplace. Oh no. Hamid knew someone must have found out where they were. His stepfather was here to find him and Kinza. Hamid knew he should have run right away to the English nurse and tell her, but he was afraid. If his stepfather caught him, he would beat him. He hid in the marketplace until it was dark. Then he went quickly to the English nurse's house. She was not in her house. In fact, she met him on the way there. Hamid, Kinza is gone. What could have happened to her? Hamid told her what he had seen in the marketplace. It was my stepfather. I saw him there. I was afraid to come right away. I should have been braver. Kinza is gone now. I know he has taken her. The English nurse said, "It's all right, Hamid. We'll find a way. Come quickly. We're going to go and tell my brother, his wife, and Jenny. They may be able to help us." After they returned to the mission house, Jenny's father and mother were eager to help save Kinza from being sold to the old beggar man, which is where Hamid was sure his stepfather was taking her. They all piled into Jenny's parents' car and began the long drive back to Hamid's house. It was a very long, slow drive, for there were not roads like there are here, and oftentimes they had to get out and push the car through mud or walk around large rocks. Eventually, they neared the village where Hamid had lived. They left the car, and Hamid and the English people went up the slope to where his hut was. Hamid was afraid to go in. He was afraid his stepfather would try to keep him and that he would beat him. He hid outside the hut, but he watched through the window as the English nurse and her brother went in to speak to Hamid's stepfather. Hamid's stepfather said he knew nothing about it. "Kinza and that worthless boy Hamid disappeared months ago. I have no idea. I certainly am not wasting my time looking for them. I have no idea where they are." Hamid's mother was very quiet, but she kept glancing over at a pile of blankets sitting by the old wife. The nurse saw what she was doing. Kinza, come here!" she cried. At the sound of that, the pile of blankets by the old wife began to move, and though the old wife tried to push them down, Kinza popped her head out from under them and came crawling to the English nurse, recognizing her voice. The stepfather was very angry at first, but the nurse's brother said that he would give the stepfather twice the money that the beggar would give him for Kinza. After some arguing, the stepfather agreed. The whole time, Hamid stayed crouching outside the window, listening, afraid to go in. Soon, the English nurse and her brother came out carrying Kinza. Hamid was ready to follow them, sad that he could not have spoken to his mother. As they headed down the trail, he heard someone whispering to him. It was his mother. She had followed them and was crouching in the bushes along the trail. Hamid, she whispered. He came over quickly to her. Hamid, I am so proud of you, she told him. You saved Kinza once and then again. Hamid tried to tell his mother about what he had learned, about the English nurse who had been so kind, about Jenny, who at first was so awful, but who was beginning to be his friend, about how well Kinza was taken care of, and all of what he had learned about Jesus. She shook her head. I don't understand, Hamid, and we have little time. I'm glad to know that you are safe. Now you must go. Hamid followed the English people back down the mountain, but his heart was heavy. What if his mother never heard about Jesus and what he had done for all of them? When they returned home, the nurse's brother said to her, My wife and Jenny and I would like to help Kinza. Kinza is blind, and there is a school in England that will be able to help her learn how to do many things that people who are not blind can do. But she would have to come to England and stay with us. When she is older, she may come back here if she wishes, or she may stay in England. What do you think?" The nurse looked at Hamid. They spoke about it. Hamid would miss his sister, but he wanted her to be able to do all that she could, to have the best life she could. And so, sadly, they watched Kinza leave with the nurse's brother and sister and Jenny. Jenny promised she would be like a big sister to Kinza, and she would not let him forget Hamid. The nurse, while sad that Kinza was gone, was happy to see how much Hamid had grown. "Hamid," she said, "you have become a strong and courageous young man. You are serving Jesus, and I would like you to serve Jesus with me here. I will teach you all that I can, and you can help me in the mission." However, Hamid shook his head. "I am grateful for all you have done for Kinza and I," he told the English nurse. "But the people of my village and my mother do not know about Jesus. Someone must tell them." The English nurse sighed. "I wish I could travel that far, but I have too much work here and no one to help me. I cannot go to your village." Hamid nodded. "I know, but I can go to my village." The nurse was surprised. "But Hamid, aren't you afraid of your stepfather? What if he hurts you?" Hamid smiled. "Jesus will be with me. I am not trapped in darkness anymore. I don't need to be afraid. I am walking with Jesus in his light. He will help me share his light with my village and with my mother." The English nurse was proud of Hamid and how eager he was to follow Jesus. Hamid stayed with the English nurse for a few more months. She taught him all she could about the Bible. She helped him get good clothes for travel and a Bible to take with him to his village. It was a sad but happy day when Hamid left the English nurse and traveled the path that he had come only a few months ago with Kinza. He had come as a small boy, frightened in the dark. He returned as a confident young man, walking in the light of Jesus, ready to share his newfound faith with his village. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the story of Hamid and Kinza. If you'd like to hear more about this story, it is from a book called Star of Light, written by Patricia St. John. You know, boys and girls, today Morocco is a country where there are no missionaries. When Hamid lived, some missionaries were able to travel there, but now no missionaries can travel there. Please pray for the people, the boys and girls of Morocco, that they too will be able to learn about Jesus' light through radio programs and television programs that share the gospel. Perhaps one day God will allow missionaries to return to Morocco. Perhaps he'll let you travel there as well.